billah and fillah, because it would just make the names longer. Anyway, let's move on. Yes.
Are those names given to them, or like the people give to them?
No, they take it. They take it as a title. They take it as a title. They sometimes they're given. Like there are examples of some of those 13 where the Turks gave them a name, gave them a title. Right? So because that just showed the weakness of the Khalifa also. Not only are we going to tell you what to do, we'll tell you what to name yourself too. Alright? So that just showed that during this period, a little bit more than 100 years, they were very weak. Alright? So during their time, the capital was moved, during the second era, the capital was moved from Baghdad to Samarra. Now the initial name was Sarra Man Ra'ah, that it gives pleasure to the one who sees it. Right? But after the Turks settled there, and they made this the capital of the Khilafah now, it became Sa'a Man Ra'ah, that the one who sees it, what's the opposite of please? To please you when you see it. To displease you when you see it. So the people started making fun of the name like that. Even though its original title was pleasing to the one who views it. It then became displeasing to the one who views it. I know it doesn't make sense in English because it's so long. But in Arabic it becomes one word and it's much easier. Just a few other things that we were discussing yesterday. So here's Basra. And we said Kufa is basically here. I don't see it on the map now. So there's Karbala. What happened at Karbala? And when did it happen? Yes, Hussein was murdered. And what year after Hijrah? No revision has taken place in the last 24 hours. That is evident. Allah musta'an. Okay, there's nothing I can do about that. So let's move on. Alright, the third era that we want to talk about is this Buyid influence and control. So this is between these years. Alright, again more than 100 years. And during this time we have 5 Khalifas. Alright, so they rule for quite long, but they have no control. They have again no authority, no real authority to speak of. So the Banu Buway, they were Persian and Shi'i. And because they were Shi'i, they did not generally not respected. Instead were used just as legitimacy. Why? Can anyone tell me why they were not respected? There's 2 things we need to discuss here. This period is a period of relative stability in the Muslim world. There are lots of rebellions and uprisings that are quickly, squashed. Lots of revolts, but for the most part, this is a time of stability. Even though the Banu Buway are in control, but there's one issue. There's 2 issues that we want to really delve into. Because if they Shi'i, it means that they do not recognize the Abbasids as being legitimate rulers. Do you understand? Because what's the main hallmark of the Shia? We discussed this last night. No, what's the... Yeah, that's part of it, but what's the main issue?
They feel that he was Ali and supposed to be...
Yes, they believe that Ali and his descendants are the only legitimate rulers of the Muslims. Anyone else is an imposter. Does that make sense? So why then did they not destroy and abolish the Abbasid Caliphate? Because there was a time when they were thinking about it, but why didn't they do it? No, they had the means, but they were concerned that if they do it, they did not have the ability to deal with all of the rebellions that would result because of it. So even though they wanted to appoint one of the Ahlul Bayt as a figurehead Khalifa, right, instead of the Abbasid Khalifa, they understood that they did not have the support of all the outlying provinces. And if, like we saw with the Umayyads, if it is a decision that the other governors don't agree with, you have a rebellion on your hand, and this was going to make it extremely difficult. Alright? Just before we move on, during this time, North Africa is for the most part it's not part of the Abbasid Caliphate anymore. It's nominal, right? People just recognize the Khalifa in Baghdad, and that's about it. Egypt and Libya and Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco and Spain. And also in other parts, people have started to consolidate their own local power. It's like the chief minister of Sarawak saying, listen, I recognize that, there's a government there in Putrajaya, but I will no longer be paying taxes. None of the funds from Sarawak will find its way into the central government coffers. Things like that. We will no longer be sending troops, to Putrajaya. So this is sort of an analogy of what was happening at the time. So just nominally, they were under the Khilafah, but for the most part, it was on paper. But in reality, it just didn't exist. Now during this time, this is when the Seljuks are starting to consolidate their power. Make a note of this. In the year 1041, the Abbasid Khalifa, he makes the Seljuk Sultan, the Seljuk leader, a Sultan. What's the difference between a Khalifa and a Sultan? Very important that we talk about this, because we'll talk about it again tomorrow night. What's the difference?
The first monarchy is Islamic based leaders.
Okay, and then what would a Sultan be?
More of a territorial thing.
It's close, but if once someone gets that title from the Khalifa, it's as if the Khalifa is saying that I leave political and military affairs under your purview. You get to decide. Right? So this is what happened. Because the Abbasid Khalifas were so desperate to get back some of the prestige that they had lost in this period that we are talking about, that when the Seljuks were available to start attacking the Banu Buway from the east, from Khurasan. I'll show you a map inshallah. Perhaps let's talk about the map first. Where's my map? Here we go. So the Seljuks are here in this area, east of the Caspian Sea, what is today Turkmenistan, and these areas. So they move into Iran, and it's at this time that the Khalifa in Baghdad, he basically makes Tughrul Beg, he makes him a Sultan. So that by the year 1055, he enters Baghdad, and he now rules with the authority of the Khalifa. Okay? Anyway, if I go back again, inshallah ta'ala, you'll see exactly what I mean. Here we have another issue that we could also spend a lot of time on, because this is when the Fatimi Ubaidi Caliphate also established itself in Cairo. There's a lot of things happening, and like I said, they obviously don't think of themselves as being under any authority in Baghdad. In fact, they believe that they are the rightful khulafa, and these people over here are imposters. Everyone with me? I haven't lost anyone yet, have I? Anyway, yes, you had a question.
No, I was just wondering, the Byzantine Empire at that point is just that size?
Yes.
Already? Wow.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
It's and inshallah, when we talk about the Crusaders later, then this year is the Byzantine Empire, and it is much smaller than it used to be. And by the time the Muslims, this battle year 1071, I'll show you the family tree later. This is when this area around here, that's basically where Uthman, the founder of the Ottoman Empire, that's where he has his base. So this is the Ottoman Empire basically expands from this region here, and grows until what we will discuss tomorrow night, inshallah. During the time of Sulaiman the Magnificent, or the lawgiver, Al-Qanuni, Al-Musharri', the Muslim Empire is 20 million square kilometers. That's the biggest extent of the Ottoman Empire. What was the biggest empire to ever rule the world? Okay. And then after that? You want to take a guess? The Mongols. The Mongols was the largest land-based, continuous land-based empire in history. The The British claim to have the largest empire in history, but it's all over the place, right? It's not connected. It's Australia, it's India, it's North America, etc. But as for one continuous land, empire, the Mongol Empire stretched from all the way from China, all the way into Poland and the Ukraine and these areas. Right? So I'll show you the map tomorrow, inshallah. Right, let's go back. Okay. So now let's begin with this last of the 4 eras. This is between the years 447 to 656. And this is the year that Baghdad is sacked by the Mongols. The year 656. During this period we have 11 Khalifas, whose names I will show you very shortly. And the Seljuks are named after one of their forefathers. Alright? So you have a man called Seljuk, and this is where they get their names from, but they are Turks, as we will see. They have complete control over all organs of state. The Khalifas are initially treated well, but as the generations go by, as the Seljuk Sultan begins to assert more and more dominance, the Khalifa is just a figurehead. Alright? So at the beginning, Khalifatul Muslimin, Amirul Mu'mineen, very respectful. But after 2 generations, the situation changes completely. Because now the Seljuks know that they are in complete control. And they let the Khalifa know that too. So after this, the Seljuks start fighting amongst themselves. I'll show you on the family tree why that happens. This is also the era of the Crusades happened during this time. The Crusades happen, they start in 1095 and Jerusalem is lost in 1099. Okay, so this is during that time. The Mongol invasion also happens during this time, like Bukhara and Samarkand. Between the year 215 and the year 220, this is where those Muslim cities are sacked. Does anyone know when Genghis Khan died? No? Just guess. I mean, take a guess. 1226, but I'll show you on another slide, inshallah. Alright. Now, many historians believe that the empire, the Abbasid Khilafah, ends at these dates. Right? 656 after Hijrah, 1258 of the Common Era. I say many. Why do I say many? Why don't I just say all historians? All historians agree that the Abbasid Caliphate comes to an end. Because last night we had no disagreement amongst ourselves that the Umayyads came to an end. But then again, there's Al-Andalus, but let's leave that for a moment. But they lost Damascus, their capital. Why don't we say that it continued and it flourished for another few centuries? Why do we say it ended there? So why is it disagreement? And that's what I want to know. The silence is deafening. Anyone? Because one of the descendants of the Abbasids is going to flee, he's going to find refuge in Cairo, and the Mamluks, who I will talk about later, they establish him as the Abbasid Khalifa. And here for another few generations, a few hundred years, until the year 1517, the Abbasid Khilafah is said to continue under the protection of the Mamluk Sultans. Is that clear? So keep that in mind. So that's why I say many historians, not all, because many of them believe that the Abbasids continued until 1517. What happened in 1517? We'll talk about that tomorrow night. But just as a, maybe someone's not coming tomorrow night, so I'll tell you. In 1517, the Ottomans defeat the Mamluks. And they enter Cairo. And when that happens, the genuine last of the Abbasid Khalifas, he hands over the mantle and the standard of the Prophet ﷺ to Salim the First. Okay? Salim the First, the father of Sulaiman the Magnificent. And Salim the First becomes the first Ottoman Sultan to be the Khalifa of the Muslims. So it's only from the year 1517 onwards until 1923 or 1924 that the Ottomans are considered to be Khalifa. But before that, they just had the title of Sultan. Is everyone with me so far? Right, Alhamdulillah. Alright, so these are our... So Al-Qa'im was the last of the third era. And from Al-Muqtadi onwards, until Al-Mu'tasim. Al-Mu'tasim is the Abbasid Khalifa that is killed by the Mongols. Do you know how they kill him? When they sack the city of Baghdad, they take him out, they roll him in a carpet, and they let horses run over him. Why do they kill royalty like this? Because they believe it's bad luck to spill the blood of royalty, like through execution or stabbing or something similar. So they'll kill you, but they'll kill you this way. Also, the Ottomans, when they used to execute royals or members of the family or of the elite, they would have them strangled, not executed like beheadings. Very merciful, huh? Anyway, this in yellow, this is the beginning of the Abbasids in Cairo. The 17, which I have not included in this list, but this is when they are in Cairo, and this continues for another 17 people. Right? So not very important. Why? Who can tell me why I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that? Because for the most part now, they are just figureheads. They continue to live in Cairo. They are considered to be the Khalifa. The Mamluks use them as a source of legitimacy. As the Seljuks use them, and as Banu Buway used them, and as the Turks used them in that second era. Okay? So they are just being used now to confer some legitimacy. They are connected to that prophetic line of Khalifas. And obviously that's going to have a lot of power. You know? Like, even as we as Muslims, why are we so connected to this concept of Khilafah? Like today, people are talking about re-establishing the Khilafah and bringing back the Khilafah that Kemal Ataturk and his cronies and his henchmen destroyed in 1923 and 1924. Why do we want this back? Why are we so nostalgic about this? Because if you think, when I say the word Khalifa, what's the first thing or the first person that comes to mind? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. You think of this golden era, this amazing time in Islamic history, where people ruled according to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There were all these amazing conquests, and the Muslims lived. Now, even though there's a lot of issues there, as we saw with Karbala and before Karbala, the civil war between Muawiyah and Ali, but for the most part, we think, we have a very good impression of that early time. So the Khilafah means a lot to us as Muslims, but now is not the time to talk about politics. Let's move on. Alright. Tughrul Bey, he is the first of the Seljuk sultans. Alright. And after his death, his nephew Alp Arslan becomes the Seljuk sultan. Alp Arslan, he is the one who defeats the Byzantines at this particular battle over here, the Battle of Manzikert. Okay, this battle is the start of a campaign by the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople to seek the help of the Christian kingdoms here, like France and others, to come to the aid of the Byzantine Empire against the Muslims. This battle here was so disastrous that it caused the Byzantines, who were Orthodox Christians, to ask the Catholic Pope for help. That's how bad that situation was. Because before that, the idea of the Orthodox seeking help from the Catholics was unacceptable. Here's a research question. Because I know how much you love research. See, I can see that enthusiasm and anticipation. The research question is, what is the difference between Orthodox and Catholic Christianity? Because why was it so difficult to ask for help? If we are the same madhab, we believe the same thing, then we should help one another. So what are the differences? It's actually quite profound. It's different from the Shi'i Sunni split, but it's also as powerful a reason for disagreement. Okay? So we move back again here. Then his son Malik Shah, he came to power. Okay, now there's a few things you need to know about this here. This is the time where there's a man who is his grand vizier. That man, his name is called Nizamul Mulk. Nizamul Mulk is a very, very important person in Islamic history. You've heard the name of Imam al-Ghazali, have you? Yes? Now Imam al-Ghazali had a teacher, and his teacher's name was Al-Juwayni. And Al-Juwayni is one of the greatest Shafi'i scholars of all time, as Imam al-Ghazali was also one of the greatest scholars of the Shafi'i madhab. But also in theology, they were very important to the Ash'ari school of thought, which is said to be the dominant schools. So, to put things in perspective, Malik Shah is in Baghdad, and his Grand Vizier, his Prime Minister, is the one who sets up schools for the Shafi'i Ash'ari scholars in Baghdad and other parts of the Muslim world, like in Iran and other places. So, if you ask, who is responsible for the spread of the the Ash'ari Shafi'i school, then you would say the Seljuks have a big part to play in that. Is everyone with me? Right? So this is all sort of interconnected, but we move on insha'Allah ta'ala. Now, this is the great Seljuk Empire that's centered around Iraq and Iran, but there's also another one that we also want to talk about, and that is the Sultanate of Rum. The Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, and its capital, Konya. This area here is the area that the Seljuks ruled. There's a lot of obviously things going back and forth here, but just for our purposes, this area here is where the Ottomans will establish themselves. Alright? Now the Ottomans and the Seljuks trace their lineage back to the same person, but then the family obviously, like you have Banu Hashim and you have Banu Abdul Manaf, etc. So the Turks also had those splits amongst themselves, but ultimately they all spoke the same language and had the same culture. And so the Ottomans will be in this area over here, and they will sort of, as we'll see tomorrow night, they will spread here. Here's a few names that you want to know. This person over here, he is the first of the Seljuk sultans to fight against the Crusades, and he loses badly. So again, very interconnected, and his name is Kilij Arslan, and he's the first sultan in Konya, a very, very important area in Turkey, even to this day. Who's buried there? In Konya? Jalaluddin al-Rumi. Have you heard of Rumi? Right? Now Rumi is buried there. Rumi is also the founder of the, what's it called? The Milveti Sufi order, the twirling dervishes. Alright? Also a very important part of Ottoman history. So all these people are extremely important. Do you know why Jalaluddin al-Rumi is originally Persian, but why is he living in the Seljuk Empire? Why did he come here? Anyone? No? Guesses? Because of the Mongols. Right? Anyway, if I'm losing you, let me go back. So this is the lineage of the first of the Seljuk sultans. You have Tughrul Bey, then his nephew becomes to power, and then after him you have Malik Shah. Everyone with me? So they are the ones who, this person here was the one that the Abbasid Khalifa made the Sultan. And so after him, his family would then be in charge of the Muslim world and would be responsible for the army of the Abbasid Caliphate. Then after them, what happened was that this man over here, he contended with Alp Arslan for succession. When he did not win in Iraq and Iran, what did he do? He set himself up in what is today Turkey, in Anatolia. You guys understand the politics here? I'll go back again. Qutaymish wanted to be the next sultan of the Seljuks, right? When that did not go his way, he went here to set himself up as a sultan. And this became what is known as the Sultanate of Rum. Rum is the Arabic word for the Romans. So because this entire area was part of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire as we know it today. Right? Anyway, So let's move on, inshallah ta'ala. The next thing we want to talk about in the time that we have left is the Crusades. Now, the Crusades happened during the time of the Abbasids and would continue until even after the fall of Baghdad. What is normally the era of the Crusades? Let me write all this stuff down on the board. You know, I asked the students on Saturday to give me a list of suggestions on how to make the Saturday class better. And one student said, use the whiteboard more. Yes. Another student said we should have like the Kahoot, the quizzes. I should prepare quizzes and then they can do them online on their phones. So I'll look into that, inshallah. Another student said, what other suggestions were there? I had a whole stack. I took them all home with me. Right? I've read a few of them. I need to read some more. But they're really good suggestions on. Alright, I'm going to leave this date over here just as a reference, okay? This is when Baghdad is sacked. So just keep that date over here. The Arabic or the Islamic date is 656. Alright, so the Crusades start in 1095. This is when Pope Urban II, he gives a speech in France, in Clermont. And he basically tells them that we need to go to the aid of our brothers. Who are our brothers? Our brothers are these people here in the Byzantine Empire. So we need to raise an army, and we need to go into the Byzantine Empire to help our Christian brothers against the Muslim infidel. Okay? You can go online and you can read the speech that Pope Urban II gave. It contains a lot of the Islamic phobic rhetoric that we are still reading today. So it's the language has changed, the style has changed, but the basic message remains the same. Okay? So nothing's really changed in 1,000 years, but khair inshallah. So most of those armies came from France. Okay? There were people from other parts of the Christian world, but most of the armies came from France. These armies then moved through Europe. Some of them moved the wrong year. Some of them, made their way to there's a port city here called Brindisi, and they took ships and they went to Constantinople. From Constantinople, they moved into Anatolia. And this is where Kilij Arslan, that's where they met the first of the Muslim states, and that was basically between 1095, 1096, 1097, 1098, and they are making their way. This is the first, so this red line represents the first crusade. Everyone still with me? Alright? So they are moving now through the Muslim world. They are defeating the Seljuks of Rum here, and they are moving through Turkey, coming down into Antioch. This siege here, they almost win, but because the Muslims are not united in defense of this city, the city falls to them. They take the city, they defeat the Muslim armies, and they continue. And in 1099, that's when they conquer Jerusalem. So that first crusade is basically 1095 to 1099. Alright? So during this time, they establish 4 states, 4 Crusader states. There's the Kingdom of Jerusalem, then there's Tripoli here in Lebanon, then there's Antioch, and then there's also another area over here, basically not Odessa. What is the name in? I forget the name now in English. In Arabic, it's Ar-Ruha. I'll double check later, inshallah ta'ala. Maybe after we finish, I'll just do a quick search. But if someone could do the search now, the names of the 4 Crusader states. But the Kingdom of Jerusalem is the main one, and everyone else is basically establishing themselves. Why? Because the people who came, they were basically all nobles here. Alright? So when they got to the Muslim world, they found, I should establish myself here. So instead of being united, they had the disagreements amongst themselves. As Allah says in the Quran, تَحْسَبُهُمْ جَمِيعًا وَقُلُوبُهُم شَتَّى. You think that they are united, but their hearts are, وَقُلُوبُهُم شَتَّى. Their hearts are disunited. You see them as one. Just think about the invasion of Afghanistan. There's a coalition, but they can't agree. as to what needs to happen. Some want to pull out forces, others want to stay. Iraq is another example of that. But so, khair inshallah. Anyway, this continues like this. Gafwan? Edessa. Not Odessa, but Edessa. Like that? Is that the spelling? Yeah, so in Arabic it is Ar-Ruha, but Edessa is what it's known as. It's in southern Turkey and northern Iraq. That's basically and northern Syria. That's where that kingdom was. So there were those 4 kingdoms. And the last of these kingdoms to fall is going to be in the year, so that's going to continue until the year 1291. And that's the city of Acre. Right? Where's Acre? Akka. Where's Akka?
North of Jerusalem.
North of Jerusalem? Yes, that's true. So what country is it part of now? Akka is in Lebanon. Right? So that was the last of the Crusader cities and states to fall. So I'm really summarizing the whole story over here. But between this period, the period that the number that you want to know is 1187. That's when Salahuddin al-Ayyubi retakes Jerusalem. Alright? So that's in a nutshell. All these other crusades are basically all failures. They don't really take back Jerusalem. They all are basically called after Salahuddin Ayyubi takes back the city. So now the Christians are waking up and they are planning all these different crusades. The 4th crusade, make a note, the 4th crusade doesn't go anywhere near the Muslims but conquers Constantinople. So Christians conquering Christians. So that isn't really a crusade then. But, historians, this is what they talk about. Alright. So, the number of crusades, long discussion over there. But this is a very important person here. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi is the founder of the Ayyubid dynasty. Okay? And during his time and during the times of the time of his descendants, they will train units of slave soldiers who are called Mamluk in Arabic. A Mamluk is a slave, right? So their soldiers are children that are brought from these regions over here, like here around the Black Sea, Bulgaria. And they are brought to Egypt and they are trained as soldiers. So they were Christian, they were converted to Islam, they were trained in military affairs, they became this amazing military force. But then, after 100 or 200 years, they then overthrew the Ayyubid dynasty and they established themselves in Egypt. Is this clear? Alright, keep this in mind because this is going to be something very similar to what we'll discuss tomorrow night. And that's the Janissaries, because the Janissaries are also Mamluk basically. Right? The same concept. We're going to take Christian boys, right, as slaves. These Christian boys are going to be converted to Islam. They're going to be circumcised. They are going to be taught Arabic. They are going to be trained in all of the latest warfare, strategy, tactics. They're going to have absolute loyalty to the Sultan. And so why are they doing this? Because they can't trust their own people. So they train a group of young men or boys to have absolute love and loyalty for the Sultan. But that's at the beginning. Might work perfectly. But as the generations go by, and as those boys become men, and those men get to levels of general, or minister, or governor, they now believe that we can also have power. Why should we continue to serve our masters? Why don't we establish ourselves as a dynasty? And this is exactly what happens. So they establish themselves as a dynasty. Alright, now let's go back again, move on towards another issue that we want to talk about. That's basically the Battle of Hittin, the 4th of July, 1187. This is when Salahuddin destroys the Crusader armies of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And then after that, he moves to Baytul Maqdis and he conquers the city. And the city is going to remain in Muslim hands from 1187 until World War I. Until the British take the city during World War I. So from 1187, basically, the Muslims will control Palestine and they will control Baytul Maqdis. Okay, so it's a long period of time. So when the Israelis say that Palestine belongs to them, under what historical precedent would that even make sense? Right? If you and your family have been living on a plot of land for 700 years, and then someone comes after 700 years and says, oh, by the way, this land belongs to me. Does that make sense? Okay, so think about it this way. If during the World War II, the Japanese occupied a particular place, and you and your family fled your property, and then you came back 5 years later and said, excuse me, this is my house. And then that person, and then you are able to produce, your title deed or something similar, or you can ask the neighbors and they are witnesses that you lived here before you were expelled from your home, then that's fine. That's 5 years, that's a year, that's 2 years. But 700 years later, and in fact the Jews had not really been living and in Palestine even before that period. Alright? So these are things to think about, things to talk about, lots of things to talk about. Alright, this is a Crusader castle. This is one of the things that they were known for. So they brought their knowledge of building castles from Europe with them, because this was something that was really important to noblemen and kings in France and Germany and other places. So this is in the north of Syria. This is one of the biggest the Crusader castles. I forget the name now. It has a French name that I can't pronounce. And so, as not to embarrass myself, I'll just skip that one. Alright, this is a good book. I really enjoyed this book. It's called The Assassins. And Bernard Lewis is a historian, so it's not a novel. Alright, it's a study of the assassins. Who were they? Quickly. They were a radical group of the Shia that carried out assassinations of their political rivals. And they tried to kill Salahuddin more than once. Right? In fact, the only thing that saved Salahuddin on one time was the fact that he was wearing a coat of armor under his garments. So they tried to stab him, but they failed. And so he had that person executed. So it's a very interesting discussion there. I want to talk about the Mongols, and you can just take a picture of this because I don't want to spend time here. Except maybe for this. Ain Jalut in Palestine. They defeat the Mongols. So this is 2 years after Baghdad is sacked, where the Mamluk army defeats. This is 10 years after they become the rulers of Egypt. They go to war against the Mongols in Palestine at Ain Jalut, right? That's 2 years after the Mongols conquered Baghdad, and they come back here and they try to take over Palestine and Syria and then march on Egypt. But the Mamluks face them and they are destroyed. And then finally, the Mamluks come to an end when the Ottoman Sultan Salim I destroys their armies in 1517. Right? That's when he becomes the Khalifa, as we said earlier. Now let's just talk about the Mongols. This is the Mamluk Empire. It's basically the whole of Syria and Egypt and parts of what is today Libya. And obviously Makkah and Medina. Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Makkah and Medina, the Hijaz area, and Egypt. So it's quite a large area. In fact, the second Sultan of the Mamluks was Baybars, and he lived in the same time as Imam Al-Nawawi. Right, just to put things in perspective. So Baybars, the second Sultan of the Mamluks, he lived at the same time as Imam Al-Nawawi, and Imam Al-Nawawi wrote him numerous letters complaining about his illegal decisions. Right, so he wanted to tax the people of Syria for his war efforts, and Imam Nawawi said, no, you can't do that. He wanted to change the status of certain endowments and waqaf. Imam Nawawi said, you can't do that. And so after a while, Imam Nawawi was forced to leave Damascus and go back to the city of Nawa, where he was born. Right, because things were becoming too too hot in Damascus. All right, now that's the fall of Jerusalem. It's just an artist's rendition, and these are Mamluk soldiers. Now, the Mamluk soldiers at the time at the height of their power were considered the best fighting force in the world. And today you can still go online. There are non-Muslims who have dedicated themselves to a study of the Mamluk army. There are even Mamluk military manuals that are available. One of the things they had to learn was that if you were in the cavalry, you needed to learn how to fire on horseback, but more importantly, how to fight as a single unit. Let's say you have 100 horsemen together, they need to be of one mind. Like just at the signal, the whole unit moves right or left, or speeds up. That was the kind of training that they had. So they were considered to be the best military fighting force at the time. But khair, we move on. Alright, this is the Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan, he dies in 1227. As you can see, Moscow, Kiev, all the way to Korea. In fact, during the time of, what's his name? Yeah, Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan tried to invade Japan as well, but they failed. You know the word kamikaze? Yeah, the word kamikaze comes from that time. Basically, it's like a whirlwind, like a tornado, and it is what destroyed some of the Mongol ships as they were trying to cross over into Japan. They did land some forces, but most of the ships were destroyed. So this is the empire at its height, and we said that Baghdad was. This is wrong. This date is wrong. So you can just change this. It's 1258 is when they take this. So there's Samarkand. Wallahi, if we had the time, we'd go into more detail here. But this is one of the worst periods of Islamic history. The Mongol invasion of the Muslim world is one of the worst periods. Ibn al-Athir has you can check this online also. Ibn al-Athir talking about the Mongols. Right? What did Ibn al-Athir say about the Mongols? He talks about the destruction, the pillage, the rape, the destruction that took place when Genghis Khan invaded the Muslim world. Like Samarkand and Bukhara, subhanallah, tens of thousands of Muslims killed. Blood was flowing in the streets everywhere. When Baghdad was taken, subhanallah, the Tigris River was running black and red. Black because of the ink of the books that they were throwing into the river, and it was running red because of the number of people that they were executing. Do you know how the Mongols used to go about it on a very industrial, commercial way, their execution? So the rule was that every soldier will be given 20 prisoners to execute. So can you imagine how quickly you could kill an entire city? If you have 50,000 soldiers, each one gets 10 to 20 people to execute. Why do they do it this way? Why not just conquer the city and rule the city, and those people are subjugated?
The lineage.
They only did it to cities that resisted. If you came out of the city with a white flag and you pledged allegiance to the Khan, then the city would remain intact and the population would be allowed to continue to live there. But any resistance was met with brutal force, and it acted. That's why, once they started coming into the Muslim world after Baghdad, Damascus, everyone was like, "We surrender, we surrender, we surrender," because they know what happens if you don't surrender. Right? So it was a powerful military strategy as well. I mean, it's horrible, it's disgusting. Absolutely unacceptable from an Islamic and moral and human perspective, but that's how they did things, right? That's how they did things. We're not going to be able to talk much about this, more about it, although I would like to. Oh, this is just me trying to be funny. This is what the Muslims thought of them. Do you know what this is from? This is from Warcraft. I just found this GIF online and I thought it would be funny. But on a serious note, this is what they really look like. Alright? So they were expert horsemen and archers, as you know. Right? They were They were the absolute best. And most of the Mongols in the army, they would have up to 3 or 4 extra horses with them for each soldier. Right? These horses were hardy. They could ride for hours. One of the reasons why they were so successful is because how fast they moved. And if you have 3 or 4 spare horses, you can just rotate, and the army keeps on going. It keeps on going. All right? And Genghis Khan was a genius, no doubt. He was an evil genius, though. He was an evil genius, but Allah knows best. Khair. So, Baghdad was the most important city, relevant to our story. The Mongol story is extremely important to the end of the Abbasid Caliphate. What I want to talk about now is, why did the Abbasid Khilafah end? What brought about its decline? I forgot to mention this last night, that everything we discussed on Wednesday and Thursday last week, all of those reasons apply to the Umayyads, all of those reasons for the rise and the decline. So it applies to the Umayyads, it applies to the Abbasids, it applies to the Ayyubid dynasty, the Uthmani dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty in Spain, the North African states, the Murabitun, the Muwahhidun. They all apply. If the focus is the akhirah and the focus is on jihad for the sake of Allah, Allah grants us great barakah. But once we give that up, then Allahu A'lam. Alright, there was something I wanted to mention now. Subhanallah, completely forgot. Oh yes, this is what I wanted to do. It's there. Alright, let's just quickly do some revision, my dear brothers and sisters. When did the Abbasid Khilafah start? 132 after the Hijrah. When did it end? 656 after the Hijrah. Yeah? How long did it last for? 524 years. Yes? Alright, 524 years. How many eras did we say we could break up those more than 500 years? Into 4. Alright? So, the first era, so that was one of power, consolidation. The second era was one of Turkic dominance. The third era was one of Persian, Shi'i dominance. Yes? And then the last of them, the fourth era, was the Seljuk. And in the time of the Seljuks, they had to deal with 2 main issues. The first of them was going to be the Crusades. Then they also needed to deal with the Ayyubis later. Right? The Ayyubids. And then after the Ayyubids, they also had to deal with the Mongols. So even though these people were supposed to be the protectors of the Abbasid Khalifas, they themselves had to deal with all of these other issues happening at the same time. The Ayyubids were preceded by another dynasty, which we're not going to talk about now, but the Zingids, I'm going to confuse matters even more. But khair, as you can see, if we were to think about the decline of the Abbasids, what would we attribute that to? Like, why did this dynasty fall? This dynasty started with people like As-Saffah, Al-Mansur, Harun al-Rashid, Al-Ma'mun, all these very powerful sultans. And it ended with the execution of the sultan by the Mongol forces. So what happened in that time? Where did it all go wrong? Is the question that we want to ask now, in ending off.
Without some deviation in Aqidah.
Okay, yes. Deviation in Aqidah, which we discussed on Thursday. What else?
It was just about conquering land and not so much about da'wah.
Not so much. The Abbasids were different from the Umayyads. There was a lot of da'wah during that period. A lot of active da'wah. So what's very, very different from the Umayyads is that the Abbasids had to deal with a lot of external intervention, right? External forces, not so much. And then these are not necessarily non-Muslim, kafir forces. These are internal Muslim forces that are causing, all of the disunity and the what's the word? The fragmentation of the Khilafah. What's another example? I mentioned it earlier. They followed the same succession process that the Umayyads did. 2 or 3 sometimes. And that is obviously a recipe for disaster, as we saw last night. What else? I didn't mention a lot about the personalities because there were so many of them. But many of them made the same mistake that some of the Umayyads did, and that was that there was a focus on my own personal desires. Music and women and hunting and all these kinds of things, and not really focusing on. And so what that means is that a lot of people were in positions of being the Khalifa, but they were not suited to administration and to government. And so if you have people coming to power that everyone around them knows that this person is not suited to the job, then you are going to have the kind of weakness that we see, right? Also, another reason that we see the destruction of the Abbasid is that the Muslims, because of that disunity that we were discussing earlier, they were unable to deal with the forces of the Crusades and of the Mongols. Because the best example of that would be the city of Antioch. A number of Muslim forces came from different parts of the Muslim world to come and defend the city. But because of long-standing rivalries and competition between those groups, some of them fled the battle, some of them did not stay long enough, some of them did not even pitch up on time. Because they couldn't decide, I'm not sure, do I really want to help you? Do I really want to come to your assistance? So for all of these different reasons, the Abbasid dynasty was doomed to fall. On the way here, I was listening to a book called The Ottoman Endgame, and the author or the reader, the person who's doing the book, so I'll just say the author because it's his words. He says that we should not be surprised that the Ottoman, how did he say it? They say the Ottoman Empire was the sick man of Europe. Have you heard that before? You haven't heard that, so we'll talk about that tomorrow night. The question is not why it didn't end earlier. The question is, why did it last so long? That's the question we should ask. Because as you can see, if only the first 100 years was a year of power and consolidation, and every other century after that was where they were being dominated by other factions, why did it last so long? Why did it endure for more than 500 years? That's the question we should ask. So what explains that? I leave that question to you. Anyone? All right. So everyone is tired tonight. Very tired. This is the city of Constantinople. No, this is Baghdad, sorry. Was it the test? Well, I'm going to say it was a test to avoid embarrassment. This is the city of Samarkand. Can anyone tell me what that is? No. Is it? We just look at pictures now. The Silk Road. Has anyone read the book The Silk Road? There's actually a new one out called The New Silk Road. The same author. I don't know what it's called. I've seen it before. Some of my friends have recommended it, but I haven't had a chance to read it. Anyway, as you can see on this map, you have Samarkand, Bukhara, Tashkent is the capital of Uzbekistan today. Then here's Kabul, capital of Afghanistan. And this is the way that you're going to make through Iran all the way to to Iraq, and then on to Syria, and then Turkey. But why is this important for the Muslims? Is because these two cities, they were there before, but when the Muslims control them, they are basically controlling the trade. There's another city here called Merv. Where is it? It's this way. I think it's in Turkmenistan today. Another very important city. One thing that I forgot to mention. Oh yeah, by the way, there was a battle between the Abbasids and the Chinese. I didn't mention that, did I? No. Yes, when the Abbasids at the beginning of their power, I think it was 756, they fought a battle against the Chinese, and that was the first and the last time that the Muslims and the Chinese actually fought a pitched battle. This was somewhere around this area over here. Right, so you can do all of this research again, insha'Allah ta'ala. Alright, we'll talk about this tomorrow night. Alright, this is what we are going to discuss tomorrow night, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. As you can see, the empire was massive. Yeah? This is at its greatest extent. 1580, Sulaiman the Magnificent, this is what the Muslims control. And as we'll see tomorrow night, this basically starts to get smaller and smaller as the years go on from here. In fact, I'm reading a book now, it's called The Ottoman World in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries. Last week I finished a book, it's called Osman's Dream. You should read that too. That's a nice one. And you should also read The Ottoman Endgame. I know how much you love to read. So therefore I am full of suggestions. Right, so these three books I recommend. Are there any good books written by Muslims? Not so much. Not so much. So we wait for new books to come on the market, insha'Allah ta'ala. Are there any questions before we end tonight? Anything we want to discuss? No? Alright then, I'll see you all tomorrow night, insha'Allah. We will talk about the Ottoman Empire, and we'll finish our series. Barakallahu feekum wa barakatuh.